Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. President Donald Trump delivered an address to the nation yesterday that warrants some consideration on our part, but we won't be focusing on it this entire time. We want to take a pulse of generally the nation and how to think rightly as Christians, faithful Christians of this blessed republic. I'm joined by a dear friend. I haven't spoken to him in a while, Peter Laffin, senior editor at the Washington Examiner. Peter, thank you for joining us, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well, Marcus. It's great to hear you, and it's been way too long.
It's been way too long. How's the family? How's everyone?
You know, everyone's doing well. My little one right now, my 3-year-old son, is in the backyard pretending to be a spider. Everything is just as it should be. How about you?
Everything's wonderful, truly. And there's a lot of personal things I can share with you after the broadcast, but grateful to be in this wonderful republic, 250 years. We'll talk about that later. Let's talk about, now I'm going to say this in jest, and I want to be clear. This is not a knock on any one political order, but I found it to be a bit of a funny joke. What some people are calling the Pettysburg Address of yesterday. Wherever we stand on the political spectrum, though, I just share with us what was the nature of the address and what good takeaways do we have from it?
That's such a great name. I hadn't heard that, the Pettysburg Address. So just quickly, for anybody who didn't sit through that entire speech, and by the way, Fox News didn't even sit through that entire speech last night, which I found to just be an amazing thing. One of my duties as an editor at a political newspaper is seeing how other places are covering it. And Fox News, which generally will air anything Trump says, couldn't stick with the speech longer than 30 minutes. But here's essentially the news of what he said last night. Essentially what he's saying is that China was stealing data, sensitive data on voter information. Now, this doesn't mean that they were attempting to switch any votes or commit any voter fraud in the machines, which I think, unfortunately, a lot of people who couldn't parse out what he was saying may have left with that impression. But that's actually not what Trump was saying. Trump was saying that China was stealing information and using it in sort of the same way that advertisers who gather information on people, they'll target those specific people with ads that they think will manipulate them into buying things. Now, there is danger in this. China is a real global adversary, and number one global adversary, and it's a serious thing that they are gathering people's voter affiliation to target them with misinformation in an election cycle. And we haven't seen that evidence for this yet, beyond Trump announcing that it exists, but it's a serious thing nonetheless. It doesn't rise, however, to what I think many anticipated he would announce last night, that a foreign government was attempting to change votes. So far, what we know, that didn't happen. The one more serious allegation that came out of last night was that he's saying that people in the quote-unquote deep state working for the United States of America manipulated information in the 2020 election, perhaps aided by China, to alter the public perception of the election. Again, not going into voting machines and changing votes, but engaging in the sort of information war that we've become accustomed to in America.
Do we have substantial evidence for this, or was some evidence presented?
No. That's not to say it doesn't exist. In fact, this is the kind of thing where you would almost assume that it does exist. It's very common for global adversaries to interfere in each other's politics. It would be much different if China or Russia were hacking voting booths, voting machines, and changing votes. That's an entirely different thing. But it's something that we take part in, too, also in foreign countries. What we're attempting to do and what they were attempting to do with us is to exploit any internal weaknesses to strengthen their own position in relation to us. It's likely that Russia and China for the last 25 years have been manipulating our flow of information to emphasize narratives that are damaging to the United States or damaging to one political party and beneficial to the political party they prefer. So it's something that I would expect. Of course, it's news if it exists. It wasn't anything like the bombshell that this speech was hyped up to be. But, nonetheless, that remains a very serious issue.
I've looked into the speech itself. I've looked into some of the evidence. And so I've got a few, as you would, complex questions about it. But I want to also make sure that we address some of the more common questions that are going around in the minds of many of our listeners. And number one is, if the evidence exists, are we going to see any legal action taken?
It's possible. This Department of Justice, and we'll see what this Department of Justice is like under Todd Blanche. I expect he'll be confirmed. He may be more willing and aggressive to prosecute some of the election fraud, election meddling stuff that Trump has been talking about now for 6 years. Certainly, nothing appeared last night in that speech that is actionable on that front. Though, as always, who knows what they have in their binders? They're not going to give away what they have too easily. So it's something we'll just have to keep an eye on. Some more context for this news last night, too, on election security more broadly. The Trump administration is very keen to pass what's known as the SAVE Act, the Save America Act. That has to do with our election integrity. Mm-hmm. And part of that is the voter ID issue. In most major countries in the world, you need an identification to vote. In America, you can't ask somebody to produce an identification while they're voting, or a driver's license, passport, something like that. Most of America thinks that we should have a voter ID law. Mm-hmm. And this includes, people who the left would argue would be most hurt by a voter ID law. Black people, Hispanic people. To me, it's a very racist contention, actually, to assume that Black people and Hispanic people have a harder time getting to the DMV. Or, are unable to take care of these very basic functions of life. It's one of those backhanded racist things that I think the left is always doing. But that's part of this too, is that Trump is attempting to raise awareness about the fact that our elections are not as tight as they should be going into the midterm. And on that front, I think he's absolutely correct. And I think most Americans would agree that we could be doing more to ensure the integrity of our election. And so the timing of a spectacle like we saw last night, that is also, that's not just an announcement for legal means. That's also, that's political theater intended to pressure some of the senators who are refusing to pass the Save America Act. And it's very interesting. On the Republican side, the Save America Act could be passed, but certain senators are unwilling to forego the filibuster, which would allow such a law to be passed with only at the 50 vote threshold and not the 60 vote. And that's its own drama playing out in our politics right now. But that's the larger context for the Trump speech last night.
And I'm very grateful for it. And I guess as a bit of a final consideration, even as this speech was being delivered, what's the general sense of the populace right now about we're out of time in this segment. Peter, every time we talk, the time just flies.
No, I'm just incredibly long-winded.
No, you're not. My guest is Peter Laffin, senior editor at the Washington Examiner. We're talking about the speech that President Donald Trump delivered yesterday and what we can take away from it as faithful Christians and how we ought to think about this. We're going to go on in the next segment to finish up that conversation and to expand into, a few things pertaining to Zohran Mamdani's visit to Rikers and ultimately by the United States. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm talking with a dear friend, Peter Laffin, senior editor at the Washington Examiner. Peter, something you said before the break, I was just mulling over a lot of what you said earlier, and something you said prompted me to ask this question, which is, was anything or a lot of what President Trump shared terribly surprising to the general American populace?
If you weren't paying attention to the particulars, and if you didn't know the history of foreign voter interference, whether it's on our part or somebody manipulating our elections, you would find that surprising. But for people who swim in these waters for a living, no, nobody came away last night shocked. I'd say the shocking part was that there was nothing new or particularly interesting that was announced last night.
Because and you and I both strive virtuously, or at least strive to practice the virtue of never giving in to conspiratorial outrage. And so I want to be cautious with my next question, which is, we're seeing flooding across social media whether the speech was nothing more than a distraction from something happening that we're not supposed to be paying attention to. I wonder if you could just assuage the outrage and bring us back to a calm center.
Yeah, I don't think that's what happened at all. I don't think that Trump did this to manipulate the news cycle and get us to not pay attention to something else. I may have thought that years ago, but I'm too accustomed to President Trump at this point. President Trump has a remarkable amount of energy. Mm-hmm. He's like a shark at the bottom of the ocean. He cannot stop moving. And this is just one of the things that animates his movement, his anger at how the 2020 election turned out. It would have been weird if he got through his 4-year term without touching on this topic. I'm sure he's going to make news a dozen ways over the weekend too. And that has a dual effect on his presidency. It's hard for him to really break through the news cycle because he floods it so persistently. So no, I'm quite confident that he wasn't attempting to distract from anything else. Trump doesn't try to distract from anything. Trump wants your attention on everything he's doing at all times. So no, I just don't buy that.
Well, I'm really glad for your professional as well as intellectual reason to help calm us and to help steady us on the radical center. And therefore, that finally raises, I guess, a bit of a final question. Just based on what you shared and what President Trump announced, is there cause for concern on the part of the American populace about that revelation about China and getting data pertaining to voting and polls?
Yeah, there's cause for concern always in our election integrity. There's cause for concern of China and Russia and Iran and North Korea's ability to hack our systems and manipulate our information. That's an ongoing threat, and that's been going on for a long time, and it will go on for a long time. But nothing happened last night that shook our world for the people who understand these issues. Mm-hmm. Like I said before, China getting our voter data to compile profiles so that they can target us with information manipulation. If they weren't doing that, I would be surprised. Mm-hmm. That they are doing it is not a shock.
Well, that's about as reasonable a position as we can all take, that we ought to be cautious, but also know that, unfortunately, we are in a digital information age.
Right. Right. It's just part of the reality. And people in other countries, we do the same thing. And this has been going on since the beginning of time, since the first spies were sent ahead of the tribe to check out the other tribes. This has been going on. So no, nothing earth-shattering was announced last night. And that's very important for people to know and understand to calm their nerves.
To shift gears to yet another hotly debated politician, Zohran Mamdani, he made some level of the news cycle. He's always, like Trump, he's always in the news cycle, but this time it seems to be a little positive.
Yeah, Mamdani he's got the Trump gift of attracting the camera, of attracting the microphone, and drawing all attention toward himself. And if he were if he were a viable presidential contender, if he were born in this country, I think he would be the runaway favorite for the Democratic nomination in 2028. He's just a very, very skilled politician, the kind of talent we rarely see. Now, I don't agree with him on anything, and so that's important for me to say when I'm complimenting his political talent. It's not an endorsement of his ideas, but I will endorse one idea of his. And this is something I wrote about that was published this morning that you're alluding to. Yesterday, Zoran Mamdani made a visit to Rikers Island, which is a prison complex in New York City. And with 100 select inmates who had been selected due to good behavior, he went in and joined them to watch the World Cup. And it was a very simple event. The video of him is he simply kind of strides into the prison complex, rolls up his sleeves, and sits down at a table of inmates who are in tan jumpsuits, and he starts talking soccer with them. And this is somebody who I think is wrong about everything when it comes to crime and punishment, when it comes to justice, when it comes to policing. I thought this gesture was uniquely Christian in its overtones, and I had to sit back and applaud it. And you have to. I think it's important in this political climate that when you see someone doing something on the other side that you can applaud, it's important to applaud it. We want to bring out the best in each other, and here Mamdani fulfilled Jesus' very explicit command in Matthew 25. When I was in prison, you visited me, and what you did for the least, you did for me. And all he did was sit down and watch a soccer game, and you could feel these inmates who were there because they had been demonstrating good behavior. You could feel them reacquiring some of the dignity that is lost from being in prison. And once they've served their sentence, they will be New Yorkers again. And so it's in our interest to encourage the rehabilitation and encourage the gaining of dignity for these people. And there's also just the spiritual Christian sense of these people are imprisoned. They've experienced justice, and that's why they're there. But Christianity places an equal emphasis on justice and mercy. And I thought this gesture, it was very Pope Francis, actually. It was a very Pope Francis gesture. Pope Francis who mastered the big media gesture. And I just found it very moving.
Well, and I want to commend the piece and the way you wrote it, because you were very level-headed. It's in the celebration of this clear good that he was trying to do to humanize himself with these inmates and vice versa. We don't, therefore, have to applaud, say, his stance on crime and what he believes about policing and law enforcement.
Right. And again, I think he gets all of that exactly backward. I think he gets criminal justice exactly backward. And by that I mean he seems to place the principal blame for the problem of crime on policing and not on the criminals, and not on what they did. And so when I say that Christianity places an equal emphasis on justice and mercy, he clearly does not understand the first part of that equation. He treats justice as if it were a nuisance. And there's a 2020 clip of him asking, I think it was during a Zoom meeting, what good are prisons even for? Now, that's a very radical thing to say, that you don't think that prisons serve any purpose. I think he could not possibly be more wrong about that. He cannot possibly be more wrong about defunding the police, which is his stated aim. Though New York City has a police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, who's been able to keep his worst impulses at bay. She's done a fantastic job with him in New York City early on in his term as mayor. But all of his impulses, from everything we can see, remain bad on the justice end of this. But on the mercy end of this, on the dignity of sitting next to somebody who's incarcerated, looking them in the eye extending your hand and shaking it and remaining in their presence, just for a little bit of time. He may have been there for an hour, but that was a very merciful act. And you could see the good it did to those inmates. And I don't think it did any harm. I saw some people in the conservative media who were kind of up in arms about it. And I was surprised that so many seemed to miss the Christian aspect of this gesture, especially because it's one of the things that Jesus asked us to do explicitly. And we know he didn't say too many things explicitly. But visiting prisoners is one of the things he did command explicitly.
Yeah. And we've got about a minute. This is going to be a very quick shifting of gears, but we've just celebrated the semi-quincentennial of the establishment of this nation. Just a quick exhortation to Christians in this nation that despite political confusion, we have a lot to be grateful for and a lot to contribute.
Yes, we do. And I want to recommend to your audience a piece that came out on our website today by a colleague of mine, Sam Abrams. I call him a colleague now. He's a professor at my old college. Funny enough, we're the only two conservative men, I think, in the world who went to Sarah Lawrence College. And he's become a good friend of mine. I think he's been on your show as well. He wrote a stirring piece today, as he always does, about how we should bring back public readings of the Declaration of Independence. And I encourage everybody to go to WashingtonExaminer.com and read it.
My guest has been Peter Laffin, senior editor at the Washington Examiner, genuinely one of the most brilliant and articulate commentators of our age. And we've been talking about a lot of news pertaining to the nation. Let's be grateful, let's pray, and let's sanctify. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.